Well, now that we've had our heads filled with ideas and our stomach filled with fuel, we can engage all of that. And over the next little while, what we've decided would probably be the best thing, because, the real purpose of today is to hear as much as possible as we can from all of you within the limitations of this format today. And of course, as you know, there are, you heard from Byron and others, there are multiple channels by which this discussion can continue, and you are all strongly encouraged to continue providing comments and questions and levels of participation through all of the channels that are being made available by CIRA. So we're going to ask Heather Creech and Jane Tallim to kind of combine the two things we want. We're going to hear from both of them now. So it's a slight change if you downloaded the agenda. We just changed the format because we think we can just have a little bit more time talking with you. So Heather and Jane are going to present. And then immediately after that, we have some really critical questions. Some, I believe, are based on some of the regional consultations that happened before, and maybe some of them have evolved. And we really would like to get a bit of a discussion going here in the room to the best of our ability. So it's not just about questions, it's also about your comments, your concerns, your ideas, where you think this could go. Because if vision and leadership are a part of what some of the themes we want to explore today, it's vision and leadership into the future and understanding what input it is. And again, I'll remind you that we have rapporteurs throughout the room, and so your comments are being noted, and as you're probably going to hear in a few minutes, to be used and included in white papers and documentation and the further development of where the internet is going. So with that, I'd like to introduce Heather Creech. You heard from Byron earlier that the economic development stream of the CIF consultations was coordinated by the International Institute for Sustainable Development. Joining us from the International Institute for Sustainable Development is Heather Creech. Heather is the Director of Global Connectivity at IISD and responsible for the delivery of IISD's program of work on how technology, in particular communications technology, is supporting and changing how we organize our governing systems, our economies, and our cultures in unprecedented ways. And I think Leonard helped us understand that one. She brings to us her work extensive experience in Canada and the South Pacific, establishing networks and providing information and training services in the legal and marine science fields. At the South Pacific Applied Geoscience Commission, based in Fiji, tough job, she established the node for the Pacific Islands Marine Resources Information System. As the law librarian at University of Papua New Guinea, she managed the Pacific Islands Legal Information Network. Her earliest work at Dalhousie University's Faculty of Law focused on legal information retrieval systems and legal research training. Heather is an adjunct professor at the Hawke Research Institute for Sustainable Societies, the University of South Australia, and the Natural Resources Institute, University of Manitoba. Welcome, Heather.
Well, that was a long introduction, and yeah, working in Fiji was certainly interesting, but boy, talk about connectivity challenges over the years. This was back when the fax machine was actually the transformative technology in international development, so an interesting series of opportunities. It's been a real pleasure to work with CIRA on really doing some of the investigation into the connection between the internet and the economy. And we had an opportunity too to learn from Media Awareness Network. This was our first opportunity to work with them to learn more about what in fact are very parallel and intersecting concerns around education and digital literacy and the economy. So what I'm going to walk you through now is some of the highlights of what came out of the city consultations that MNet IISD worked on with CIRA. We had a very good overview this morning from Marta of Industry Canada's work on the digital economy. The digital economy really encompasses those sectors that produce ICTs, information communications technologies, goods, services, applications, and content. And as she noted, in Canada, that accounts for about 5% of GDP. Within the OECD, it's actually closer to 10%, but as Minister Clement has noted, that really also leverages the other 90% of the economy. And the internet underpins all of this now more than ever. It's the strategic resource that connects the networks and devices that we all use across all sectors: business, government, civil society, health, education, commerce, and so on. And that we use it to access, create, share, process, communicate, and store information and knowledge. And again, this is why my institution is so interested in these issues, because it's the technology that may give us the capacity and the tools to actually get to a more sustainable global society. We went into these consultations with two key considerations. First of all, what are the economic opportunities that might be available to Canadians that are based on the internet? And we quickly realized, after posing that question, that the economic opportunities are legion and converging, and that really the issue is not what are the economic opportunities, but what do we need from the internet to support the economy. And all stakeholders stand to benefit from an internet that is open, accessible, affordable, reliable, stable, and secure. And we've certainly heard that over and over again this morning, and we heard that over and over again across the country. And then the second consideration going into the city conversations was not only what do we want the internet to be, but how is the internet going to affect Canada's capacity to respond to some of the major challenges that it's facing in terms of social development, social cohesion, environmental challenges, and economic challenges. Will the internet continue to have a transformational impact on the innovation process, on economic and social structures, on energy and materials requirements? What's the energy footprint of the internet? Very interesting research out there on how the greenhouse gas emissions coming just from data centers are getting close now to 6% of overall global greenhouse gas emissions. So that's interesting. It's equivalent to or surpassing the airline sector now. So these are some interesting challenges that we need to better understand. Patterns of politics and governance, certainly what we've seen across North Africa is indicative of the transformation that the technology is bringing to bear. And then finally, changes in individual behaviors, attitudes, values, certainly many of the things that Mr. Brody spoke to over lunch. So the key questions going into the city consultations were, what are the issues related to building a digital economy in Canada? What do people think are the burning issues, the most fundamental challenges? What are the barriers and opportunities? What barriers and opportunities exist to address or resolve those challenges? And then the third question, which is why we're all here today, it's the who question. Who needs to act? In whose hands is the responsibility to begin to address the opportunities and the barriers? Who are the stakeholders? So I'll just walk you through really quickly some of the key messages that came out from the three consultations. The digital economy discussions were held in Winnipeg, Iqaluit, and Toronto. And coming out of Winnipeg, one of the key messages was that from their perspective, the internet is an essential support for the future development of our main sectors: agriculture, resource, and energy. And we had one person there who was a farmer, lived outside of Winnipeg, about 40 kilometers outside of the perimeter of the city, was a member of the Farmers Association, the Keystone Agriculture Producers. And he said it was continuing to frustrate him that at this point in time, he can still only get a dial-up connection to his farmhouse. And this is 40 kilometers outside of Winnipeg. And yet he has major information needs. So the way that he resolves them is that he takes his iPhone with him into his combine, and when he's out on the fields, he starts looking for information on the 3G network that he can get access to find out about crop diversification. And so he told a wonderful story about how, as he's going over his fields, he thinks, well, you know, I've heard about this interesting crop. It's a little bit different from what I'm used to growing. I need to get a bit of information about it. So he phones up a research center in the States and says, what about this? And the guy said, well, you know, that's an interesting idea, but that particular crop may not do well in as cold an environment as you have up in Winnipeg. But here's the number for a guy in Fargo who's experimenting with it. Why don't you call him up? So 5 minutes later, he phones up the guy in Fargo, all while he's going through plowing his fields. And the guy in Fargo says, yeah, you know, actually, we're having some really great success with that. So in the matter of half an hour, while he's out on the field, he's come up with a whole new approach to diversifying his crop production. How do we continue to capitalize on that and create the enabling environment for that? And more important, how can we get broadband into his house so that he and his children and his wife can share in that task of running the family farm? The other thing that he was fascinated with was how in the States, farmers now have the capacity to run their irrigation systems from their homes. So they don't actually have to go out onto the fields. Wireless sensor networks now make it possible for them to control when the sprinklers come on, where they're deployed, and how long they're on for. And it's done through communication systems. So these are big changes that are taking place. In summary, out of Winnipeg, some of the really central things to the people there, and we've heard them all before, access. But also not just access to the infrastructure, but access to services, access to government services, access to health services, access to information and education online when they need it. Security and privacy were central issues. The roles and management questions around, well, who's making decisions about all of this? Who do I go to complain when something doesn't work or I'm not getting the level of service that I need? And then the intersection with other domains, the intersection with the environment, with energy. Manitoba Hydro is a major employer in Manitoba, real aspirations for its growth as a renewable energy provider, really interested in smart grids, but smart grids is a demand-side concept, and you need IP version 6 in order to begin to allow the IP addressing within a smart grid configuration. So those are some of the things some of the flavor of what came out of Winnipeg. Iqaluit was absolutely wonderful, and I know that Mark Buell from CIRA has roots in the far north, and so he came with us to that event as well, and it was a wonderful experience. The main message from that is that Canada has a northern strategy. The federal government has drafted and released a strategy for the development of the north related to economic issues, social, environmental, national security concerns. It does not deal with the internet with any degree of sophistication. The northern strategy needs an internet component. So that was the key message coming out of Iqaluit, that it's fundamental to northern development, and that the infrastructure, rolling out the infrastructure, is not going to come from the private sector. This was a real eye-opener. Normally, we think often of the private sector as being the driver for connectivity in many respects. So we were saying, well, what about the mining companies? They're going in there, they're going to need telecommunication services. Isn't that going to drive the proliferation of the infrastructure? And they said, no, the problem is the remoteness, that you'll get one mine in one location. The next mine will be 600 miles away, and there'll be no surrounding community infrastructure. And therefore, they simply build out their own satellite services to meet their own immediate needs, and there is no co-benefit to the rest of the region. So they need a different approach. It's not going to come from private sector industrial development. Access and cost, big issues for them, tied to satellite, tied to a subsidy arrangement that lacks a certain predictability. Connectivity, they need a variety of technology options available to them. They can't continue to rely on extremely expensive satellite connections. And then finally, from Toronto, This was also a really interesting discussion where we had such a cross-section of participants that we actually got into some reframing of what we understand the connection between the global economy and the local economy. And how can the internet be a platform to support that, where people sitting in small businesses, 1 and 2 person shops, small NGOs can actually connect globally, but the unit of production actually takes place in our own backyard. And this has real potential for building out sustainable communities, but you need the internet to do that. So they talked a lot about innovation, confidence and competitiveness, business development, how you network economic actors across different industries and different sectors. And then finally, understanding internet ethics and behaviors and smart development. Some common concerns across all 3 consultations: the transition issues to version 6, the need to roll out internet-based smart systems, rural and northern access, affordable access to world-class infrastructure. We've heard all of this morning as well, innovation, but really, really strongly, and I'll end on this point. Over and over again, we heard in all 3 cities, where's the vision for this in Canada? Where's the leadership? Who are all the stakeholders? And how can we have a multi-stakeholder engagement to build this vision and leadership?
Thank you, Heather. The digital literacy consultations were coordinated by the Media Awareness Network. To present the findings from the consultations, we are joined by Jane Tallim. Jane Tallim is co-executive director of the Media Awareness Network, an internationally recognized expert in media education and digital literacy. Jane has been a part of MNET's groundbreaking research on young Canadians in a wired world, and has developed award-winning resources to help children and young people become thoughtful and engaged media consumers. Jane.
And I'd like to also echo Heather's thanks to CIRA for spearheading this, because it's been an amazing opportunity for us as well, just to connect with Canadians, to hear their thoughts on something that's very germane to what we do, which is digital literacy. At each of the sessions, the digital literacy sessions were held in Montreal and Halifax and Vancouver. We started the sessions talking to people a little bit about what digital literacy was from our perspective, just situating it for them. And really, in a nutshell, we firmly believe that these are survival skills for the 21st century. And as you've seen in all the presentations today, it touches all facets of our life. We have to have a certain skill set now to be able to integrate technology into our leisure, into our learning, into our work. It's what we use to communicate, to connect, to collaborate. It's how we need to develop skills for managing and mitigating risk. And it's also the whole information literacy aspect that's so important, is the whole idea of how can you access information? How can you measure its quality? How can you use it? What we talked about with each group was very much what Jerry talked about this morning so eloquently. So she just saved me about 6 pages of notes. I'm really appreciative. But it's the whole notion of digital literacy as being the ability of individuals to use, which includes being able to access the technology, to understand what they're doing online, to understand the greater issues, to understand how technology affects our perceptions, our beliefs, and our attitudes, to understand the potential. As you saw in Leonard's presentation at lunch, I was really struck by the increasing sophistication in the types of technology that are becoming an everyday part of our life. And with our understanding of that technology, we have to develop critical thinking skills to go with it. And creation as well is immensely important. And creation is what's going to, at its highest level, drive innovation and research and development in Canada, But it's also the whole idea of us being able to create in how we collaborate and communicate with others, how we can use rich media to express ourselves online. And with creation as well, the important aspect is having us as active participants in digital society. So all these things are really important that we have the skill sets to be able to facilitate. We talked at our sessions quite a bit and in our paper about the importance that other countries around the world have placed on digital literacy skills development. And this can be seen in the national strategies for the digital economies in countries like Britain, in Australia, in New Zealand, and the United States. And in all these countries, digital literacy skills development is a central pillar of their strategies. When we're talking about digital literacy skills as well, it's really important to recognize the various needs of different segments of the population. For example, as Canadians, there are skills that everybody needs. It's those cradle-to-grave skills that the average population is going to be using in their daily lives. Then there are the skills that most of us need, and these are more specialized skills for working. And at the highest end, of course, you have the people who are innovating and researching and developing at the post-secondary level. All these together drive the economy. We've found as well, looking at precedent around the world, that to be successful, digital literacy programs need to be implemented in 4 interlocking spheres of influence. And this, again, is really important when we're thinking about stakeholders at the table. You have public awareness and community programs. You have job training and skills development. You have education, both K-12 and post-secondary. As an organization that does focus primarily on youth in our K-12 education system, we are very concerned that conversations about education seem to start at the post-secondary level. And of course, government has a significant role to play. It's also that whole notion of lifelong learning here, because even people who are able to use technologies, for example, may not have the sophisticated levels that they need to use it to get a job. And people who are currently employed in the workforce, it's evolving all the time. So we have to be sure that we can train and upgrade people's skills as part of their employment as well. So like Heather, at each of our sessions, we asked the same set of questions relating to digital literacy. And we are really looking forward to expanding the dialogue today and having you consider these as well. So we asked, what the issues were relating to digital literacy skills development, depending on the sector you come from, your experience, your perspective. We asked about barriers and opportunities that exist in addressing these issues. We had at a few of our sessions some really good ideas shared, community-based best practices, things that might be models for other sectors. Who needs to act and who the stakeholders should be at the table are also very, very important. We began each session by asking our participants prior to coming to think about what they thought the future of the internet should be. And these were some of their visions for the internet. Participants saw it being a place where access to information and all kinds of online services are available to everyone, where Canadians can connect and innovate and share knowledge and information, an internet that promotes and preserves Canadian culture, that facilitates social, business, and economic interactions, that encourages and supports the creative economy, that promotes democracy and inclusiveness, that enhances quality of life, that delivers educational tools and resources, that's safe for all Canadians, especially youth, that protects personal information, and that provides a secure place in which to conduct business. And as Heather mentioned, there were several areas of concern that came out quite strongly in both the consultations for the digital economy and the digital literacy consultations. In our sessions, we heard over and over again that universal and affordable access needs to be priority, that literacy can't start without access to tools. There was overall agreement on the need for continual development of digital literacy skills throughout our lives particularly for children and youth and those who are less advantaged. Participants talked about the importance of Canadians needing to have faith in the internet, needing to believe that it's a stable and secure platform for business, education, and leisure, and the role that digital literacy can help in facilitating this confidence. There was much conversation at our sessions about the internet's potential for fueling innovation and how a digitally literate population is instrumental in achieving this. Many of these conversations about innovation included concerns about the need to balance rights and responsibilities as both creators and consumers. And closely connected to access was digital inclusion for all Canadians, regardless of geography, age, socioeconomic status, and education. For example, even in large urban centers where you have fairly good access, there's still a segment of the population that for one reason or another isn't able to use and benefit from it. This is something that we have to explore more. In all three of the sessions, our participants expressed the need for access to its fullest sense as a basic human right. So in the next few slides, I'm just going to show you a few quotes that came up from the participants at our session, starting with Montreal. In Montreal, participants voiced concerns about literacy, not only about digital literacy, but where digital literacy fits in the whole context and notion of being literate. And they talked about the need to move beyond just teaching people how to use technology and teaching them how to use it to its fullest. The quote that's at the top here specifically referred to government, but in general conversation, it came out over and over again that education has to play a significant role as well. Participants in Montreal felt that Canada's digital literacy skills were generally low, especially when it comes to creating content, and this was alluded to in other sessions as well. The importance of promoting and protecting French language and Canadian culture was also a focus. Participants noted how challenging this is in a medium where the language of doing business is predominantly English. They talked about perhaps the notion of a .Quebec designation as one way to preserve culture, but overall, participants expressed desire for leadership in promoting and preserving Canadian content. In all three sessions, participants talked about the need for Canadian copyright legislation that reflects the realities of a digital world. Participants in Montreal and our other sessions also stressed the need for all levels of government and public and private sectors to work together in facilitating education, skills development, interaccess, and online services. Like our other sessions in Halifax, a major concern revolved around the need to rethink our education system so that Canadian youth can take greater advantage of the internet to access knowledge, facilitate learning, and support creativity. Overall, participants gave our K-12 system a failing grade, voicing concerns about outdated curricula and insufficient professional development and training for teachers and administrators. It was felt that meaningful and creative partnerships between private sector and government are needed to bring our education system into the digital age. In recognition that for many adults, acquisition of digital literacy skills takes place outside of the schools and workplaces, it was felt that more needs to be done to bring ordinary Canadians to the table so that we can determine and prioritize the skills and training that's needed within the general public. In Halifax and our other consultations, concerns were also raised on how we can best meet the needs of more marginalized and vulnerable segments of the population. Safety and security was another common thread, with participants talking about the need to educate Canadians to better protect our safety and security online. This includes not only knowing existing laws and regulations, but also the ability to create strategies for maintaining personal privacy, to conduct transactions properly, to manage identity, and understand rights and responsibilities. In Vancouver, the need for education and online privacy and protecting and managing personal information was also highlighted. Privacy and safety education for youth was seen as being particularly important in this group. Participants at this session also focused on funding issues and the needs for new models to support institutions that are fostering digital literacy. They also felt, again, like Halifax, that creative approaches are needed in cost sharing the large expenses involved in increasing access and education and training in rural and remote areas. At all the sessions, participants talked about the transformative potential of the internet to deliver essential services to Canadians. Although concerns were raised that we're not moving forward quickly enough in using the internet to deliver services like healthcare, everyone agreed that digital literacy skills are needed for Canadians to get the most out of these services once they're in place. What struck us at all the sessions was how well-grounded participants were in recognizing the richness and complexity of the internet. In one conversation about Canadian youth in Vancouver, one participant spoke of the future of the internet as being both daunting and promising, saying that it lies in the way it reinvents our public lives, the way it creates new spaces for public engagement, and the way youth begin to enter into that public performance of themselves and their relationships with others. He saw this as being daunting and challenging in lots of ways, but also very promising and remarkably rich, which I think all of us would agree with. So like Heather, we are leaving today with some questions for you that we're hoping will stimulate discussion here. This is kind of a twist on what we've been doing earlier in the day, in that really we're not asking you to ask us questions, we're asking you for your thoughts and opinions. We're asking you to share ideas, because what we would like to do ideally is add your voices as part of our whole consultation process in the white paper that we're going to produce. So Chris will review some of the broader questions with you, but we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
So as both Heather and Jane mentioned, we really want to hear from you now. And the two broad themes that we want to explore are, as you've heard, the internet's impact on the Canadian economic development and digital literacy. So let's just focus for a moment on digital literacy. And if you'll allow, what we really want to do now is, if you have a question, that's fine. But if you want to just make a comment or share an idea or just let somebody else what you've got in your head, that's great. And once you've got a microphone, hang on to it for a minute, because we might want to talk, okay? We might want to talk, and then we'll let somebody else talk after that. Now, Jane and Heather may participate in some of that, may add comments. We're just trying to keep it fairly free-flowing. And I missed you earlier, sir, so you get the mic first. Right here.
Thank you. It's Rick Steele. I'm with the Yukon Technology Innovation Center.
It's coming. Yep.
Yeah. I was mostly making a comment because it's relevant to both subject areas on this one. I mean, I'm happy that there was some consultation done in the north, but I do think we have to be clear that there's not one north. There are functionally at least three norths, and they each have very different social issues, very different internet connectivity issues, and I do think we need to take a more segmented approach to looking at the situation in the Yukon, looking to it in the Northwest Territories, and in Nunavut, because the issues in each area are not identical. And we can't assume that there's one Canadian North. There's at least three, and probably about half a dozen.
And could you expand further on this idea of taking a segmented approach? What would be an ideal approach for you in that way?
Well, I do think a working tour and engagement with each of the jurisdictions would be very, very productive.
All right.
The situation in the Yukon is utterly different from what you would have seen in the Iqaluit. They're living on a trickle and really can't buy internet. In the Yukon, internet is actually quite plentiful, but extremely expensive. Because we're in essence paying to an uncontrolled telephone monopoly. So we need to address those things. The Northwest Territories has a kind of medial position. The issue of internet literacy is hugely pronounced in Nunavut and is of major regional importance in the Yukon, but the issues are not the same, and they need to be detailed.
Okay, thank you very much. If we could get the microphone to come forward to this gentleman in the gray jacket right here. Keep coming, keep coming. Got to keep my promise. Here we go. There.
Hi, my name is Peter Timisk. I'm a member of CRA. I have a number of .ca websites, and also volunteer with a group called Computers for Communities, which refurbishes cast-off computers right here in Ottawa and puts open source software on them and then donates them to people who don't have computers. I'm concerned, I guess generally, a lot of the points coming into this, out of this consultation so far, seem to have definite political positions. In other words, I read in certain studies that if the schools are doing fine, someone outside thinks the schools need to be reformed, they come in, cause all sorts of problems for the schools in this reformation, and the teachers deal with it and cope with it, and then they get back to the business of teaching, which they were doing fine just before the reformers came along. So my question comes up, like, yes, I agree digital literacy is important. I know how to program, for instance. I've known it since my teens. I know there's lots of people in Canada who've taken at least one programming course in high school or university. We all have to know that programming, like the doctor said this morning, learn programming because it teaches digital literacy. And I teach someone in their middle age to program at work. And they're not quite as fussy as me, but they get the job done. They can pick up programming at that age. So I realize that digital literacy is a valuable thing. I just question whether this consultation really has a valid voice on education, okay? I mean, we may be from a variety of positions, right? Maybe you ask teachers, maybe your select group included teachers, but to be critical from the outside of the school system is, I think, another mistake that could be made.
Okay, thanks. I think Jane has comment.
Yeah, and I just, that's a very, I might, I love it. That is a valid point, and these observations actually came from representatives who were from faculties of education, from ministries of education, from teachers as well. But that said, in our submission actually to the consultation by the government, what we talked about was having to bring multiple stakeholders to the table. So I think in the education sector, it's really important to facilitate dialogue with the ministries of education, with the school districts, the schools, to get a better sense of the needs. I agree totally. You don't want someone doing, curriculum du jour. But I think there are concerns about the critical thinking that is needed to go hand in hand with the use of the internet and other technology.
Just say one more thing. I think this debate about private sector being involved in school is very old. It predates before the internet. Mm-hmm. It's always been an agenda to get people prepared for the private sector working. In my experience personally, and this is just myself, I have had computer skills all my life. I haven't had the jobs. People didn't give me the jobs. I could do the work all this time because I'm doing it now. They didn't give me the jobs. So there's a disconnect here between the job market out there, people with the skills, and the companies, the private sector, that has these jobs and says there's a shortage of talent. I'm not sure that's really true.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We have a question over here on the left. Microphone's coming, and then we'll get an online question next.
Ron Dolmy, Sustainability Journal.
Can we get the mic working, please? Just try again, please, sir.
Can you hear me now? That's
Yep.
better, yeah. Ron Dolmy, Sustainability Journal. Historically, if you look backwards, the primary activities for the internet have been the development of the technology itself and of the skills development to use that technology. In the future, that may not be the case. In the future, our problem may still be to get connectivity to information, but the bulk of the information we need access to is information that's owned by somebody. It's intellectual property. And I think we need to develop systems like electronic libraries that provide public access to that proprietary information on an affordable basis that does not create monopolies.
Do you have any ideas on how we would go about developing such electronic libraries?
Yes, I in fact did it 30 years ago. I developed an electronic library system that was in fact quite widely used here in Ottawa. And it was a hierarchical system that allowed libraries to share publications between themselves, but the libraries would purchase the information, and that's where the remuneration process occurred. They would then make it available down through to the lowest level library, and the individual connected to that would have free access to the information. So the needs of the information owner were met by, because the libraries, there are 1 million libraries in the world, so there's lots of market to sell the product to the libraries, and then the billions of people who want access to that information would have free access.
Thank you. We have something from online, if we could go, and I'll be coming back into the room right after.
There's a lot of discussion online right now about the Community Access Program, and the question that started it all is from Darlene Thompson, and she asks, the Community Access Program addresses quite a few of the questions as to literacy and economic development that the report alludes to. Does anyone have any thoughts about the Community Access Program and the support in its continuation?
We actually had representatives from community access programs at some of our sessions, and I agree with Marita's comment this morning. They have provided an essential service for 10 years now in facilitating that need in the broader community. What we're telling you is essentially what participants told us, but there was overwhelming agreement on the value of community access programs in being part of that solution that we're looking for.
Just, does anybody else in the audience have a comment on the Community Access Program? Yes, and then I'll come to your question next.
Thank you. That was my comment. Marita Mall, Telecommunities Canada. You're asking for comments on community economic development and digital literacy. And I would suggest that those are very much the same thing. They operate in the same box. If you don't have digital literacy, you're not going to have very good community economic development. The Community Access Program for 10 years now has 4,000 sites at the moment across Canada, helping small, medium businesses get their job done, teaching them how to do various processes, teaching seniors, helping youth. This program has been on a lifeline for years now. It's a disgrace, it really is. We don't have to reinvent this. This exists. There are lots of really more complicated things, doing things in the elementary and secondary formal education program. It's already been brought up. That's complicated. You've got the provincial governments involved. It's very complex. You've got the municipalities. Here you've got something that exists. All we need to do is stand up and say, yes, this is a good program. It really works. All the evidence, all the research, and there's tons around it, have been supportive. What is our problem? Yeah. We need to support these things. It's good for economic development. It's good for communities. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. Thank you.
Comment? Heather?
Yeah, if I could just add to that. It's a bit of a conundrum. It's well known that one of the challenges with ICT adoption in Canada is that the small and medium-sized enterprises aren't taking it up. There is still a barrier to the actual use of the technology in small business. And so we don't know why this is, and yet it's clearly becoming so much a part of just your basic level community prosperity. But it's not happening at the rate that it is in other countries.
Okay. Right here, sir. Behind you.
Xander Meller. I have some just general comments, sort of tied into Leonard's talk during lunch.
As long as it relates to economic development,
to elementary to economic development, more to the education side of things,
sure.
As well. I just tying it back to that. There's been an evolution of technologies and of media that we've seen because of technology. We haven't seen that same sort of evolution within the classroom, within education. We've seen more of a focus or development on the logistics. As education's become bigger, we've had larger classrooms, we've had segregation instead of just the one schoolhouse where all ages are taught. Instead we have, by one teacher, we have different teachers specializing on just certain grades, and the curriculum being sliced up even more into more and more specialized things. So it's very much a factory-like approach, and it's also very much top-down where the teacher is doing all the teaching. The teacher's very much like a television. There's one node of information, spreading it out to the students. It was good for the logistics we had. It was good for the culture we had in the 20th century. But in the 21st century, we're moving to that social media. We're moving towards that interconnectivity and networking. Why can't we look at that and reinvent the classroom as well? I'm not talking about having at-home learning. I'm talking about the actual physical classrooms. Go back to our roots of community, where we have different ages of students working together and actually networking and learning from each other. And that way help teachers and also help students develop social skills that they can use throughout their lives. Like, it's the kind of thing where, just to finish off my comment, my question comment, it's if we do that sort of, if we move towards that sort of model, then people can, then I think we can get through to those students who are suffering under the current system.
So in addition to the idea of having multiple age groups of students networking together more dynamically, any other thoughts on how we could do that?
Well, we can use the technology to facilitate that.
Sure.
Like, if we look at how, what students are responding to, what people do when they go home, these kids do when they go home, is they turn on their Xbox and they network with other kids. They have these Xbox games have achievements that they achieve, that they show their friends. Their friends ask them. If you look on like these gaming communities and that, they have all sorts of, they have gamers or children teaching other children how to do these tweaks, how to achieve these achievements.
Sure.
They have the students, the kids are developing these networks of education themselves.
Okay.
We can take those models and bring them into the
So
classroom.
if they know how to teach themselves now, maybe we can show them how to teach themselves more kinds of things using that
Yeah,
technology.
exactly.
Sure.
You can
Okay, great.
use that kind of models
Good.
within the classroom.
Thanks.
And maybe take some of the onus off the teachers and have people and having the kids help teach themselves.
Great. Would you pass the microphone to the gentleman right in front of you? Back towards me. That's it.
Oh, there's no response for this? Okay. I don't
Would you tell us
really...
who you are, please?
Yes, my name is Luc Trudel. I'm here as an individual involved with the internet. I don't exactly know if I'm going to get it out in the perfect
Vous le
way.
dire en français?
In English is fine.
Okay.
I think more people will understand this way. But I think there's an issue which, in light of all the discussions we've seen today, first of all, I appreciate the fact that we are invited to comment and not simply ask questions, because it's a rare occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
You have a global phenomenon. Allusions were made to Egypt. Allusions were made to Wisconsin crisis right now. And some people say that the two events are not connected. Some people say that they are totally connected. And then the technology phenomenon of like the Twitter. Some people say that this is what caused the revolution. Well, I would argue that there's a singularity in the moment in which we're living right now, where our whole, kind of like what Leonard was talking about earlier about the pants not fitting, where you have the whole economic system itself not fitting our identity as human beings. And so this is where corporations, if we allow them to dominate the discussion on where is the internet going into the future, I don't see corporations' viewpoint being the one that is going to defend the identity of the individual as a creative human being. And so we have to recognize that we do have this creative nature, and that our economy should be perhaps upgraded to reflect that reality that we're living in right now. And a lot of people since the beginning of the internet have come the benefits of technology itself. as well as come to realize that there's a benefit in allowing every individual to come to develop his or her own mind, because we imagine somebody, a great innovator, not having been given an adequate opportunity to develop his mind, could not have made this internet a little better. So I would just say that we're coming at a point where we have to realize that it can be solved. I mean, we can go forward and accelerate our development, and we can go places where most people never dreamed of. We can go do wild things like go back to the moon and things like that. But we have to recognize that the internet and the information technology is just one part of our lives, and it should be used as something which helps the productive aspect of our physical economy. Like, we depend on clean water, people having jobs, and if this internet and this technology is so good, and we want it for all the people we like, shouldn't we want it for everyone in the world?
Sure.
So my question is, or my statement is, I know it's long, and I appreciate the fact that I'm allowed to make this statement, and that you're listening. I would just say that it's time to think big in terms of maybe rejecting some of the dogmas, economic dogmas, that are preventing our development at this point.
Thank you very much. Can I go to the lady at the back of the room, sitting at the table? Just in front of the camera there. Put your hand up again. That's it. You're the winner.
Good afternoon. My name is Naz Butt. I'm a student from the Schulich School of Business, and I work in the internet industry. But my question was targeted, in the surveys you did you talk to universities and colleges and university students and college students and administration?
Yeah. Certainly, I can speak to that. ISD worked with CIRA as well on the survey, and the survey went to a very broad section of people. Partly, in large part, it went out to the .ca membership and registrants, which of course would include universities with a .ca address. It would have gone to students who have a .ca domain name of their own. But then we also invested a lot of time also targeting specific sectors that may not necessarily pick up and answer the survey through the CIRA channels. And those would have gone to research institutes at universities. They would have gone to labor associations, including student unions, for example. We tried to reach out to them as well. We got a fairly good return, but it certainly was under 1,000. So we're not talking about a public opinion poll sampling of the general population, but it was enough for us to begin to hone in on a few issues.
Go ahead, try again.
The reason
Mike?
The reason why I was asking is because mentioning about the education sector, I still think that it doesn't stop at grade 12, that it continues on to colleges and universities. And as the gentleman in front of me mentioned, that the corporate and private sectors, have surpassed. You've got abilities to work from home. I don't see why there's a reason if your child is sick, your child can't go to school from home. Or access, when the weather is bad or there's a storm warning, students who've paid thousands in tuitions miss classes because of that, because there's no access to an education. There's a book by Don Tapscott called Grown Up Digital, and he talks about the education sector and how you're catering towards a generation of 2-year-olds who have grown up online. They know how to work your cameras, your BBMs, everything. And the classroom's way that it's taught and everything that's done teaching-wise contradicts that. Aside from that, you have print publications, and we're learning from textbooks that are, 5, 6 years old, cases that are 10 years old, because of copyright or patent issues. Just some things that would, I think that the people involved in the education sector need to hear about students. Considering how much we pay, access should not be denied to us, and the availability of the content should be up to date and current. Thank you.
I'm going to go here, and then I'll be coming here next. Yes.
Hi, first of all, I wanted to say thanks to Sarah or whoever set up the technology in this room, because it's very intuitive. Thanks. My name is Geraldine Somerville. I run a nonprofit organization in Ottawa called iSisters Technology Mentoring. We've been around for 10 years. We run computer classes and technology classes at a couple of shelters and 2 immigrant centers currently in Ottawa. I just wanted to comment on digital literacy and the definition that you brought up, which is use, understand, and create. And I just wanted to also allude to the point that was made about funding models and how they are kind of out of date, and how I often feel when I'm writing them, which is about 90% of my time, like Leonard said, a misfit. It just seems to me that those who are providing funding nowadays have a different idea of what digital literacy is. They don't respect it, and they don't see the value in it. And I just wanted to allude to that and wondered if Jane had anything to comment about it. I also wanted to comment on Computers for Communities, who donated 10 computers to 10 of our students at the Immigrant Women's Services Ottawa recently, who are very appreciative. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Was it Jane for comment?
Yeah. No, I totally hear you. And this was something that was echoed especially by people who participated, who represented community programs like yours, working with New Canadians and more disadvantaged people. And what really resonated with me is the notion of valuing, digital literacy. And I think it is something that there's still an education piece that has to be done in helping us really fine-tune it. Basically we're looking at what are the skills we need not only to function but thrive in a digital culture. And it's looking at the specific needs of various segments of the population. And it's getting a better handle on what the needs of the people that you serve are, getting a better handle on what the needs are of the university levels students, of the K-12 students. I think there is a lot of questioning that still needs to be done before we can move forward on anything, and I totally agree with you on that.
Thanks. We're going to go here, then online, and over here.
Hi, are we here? We're good? Okay.
Yep.
My name is Alex Hoslet. I'm with Momentous as a digital marketer. There's been a lot of discussion today about digital literacy and different demographics. I'm a young guy. I'm 25, a year out of school, and my whole life basically revolves around the internet. I'm a huge believer in the capacity of education as a tool to bring up our digital literacy. In my specific situation, I can't speak for everyone, my father, although being a successful business person, still thinks of the digital economy as a utopian ideal on the same scale of communism actually successfully working. To this day, he doubts that I'm actually employed doing this. Family dinners are not a fun event. My K-12 teachers, wonderful people that they were, spent more time developing my cursive handwriting skills than any of my computer skills. And although I write lovely, it hasn't secured me any jobs. So my concern is essentially this. We have a generation that is raising our children and educating them that we have established, in general terms, has a literacy level, digital literacy level, much lower than the potential of the students. And although they have a huge role in their lives and there's so much potential, if they don't understand and value this, we really only have 2 options. Either morbidly, we can wait for the generation to pass on and say, too bad about grandpa, it's okay, I get the computer though, I'll teach you how to use it. Or we can have an education program that's broader than our K-12 schools to bring all Canadians up to speed, whether they are baby boomers or Gen X, and make them understand the value that the digital economy has for Canada, and put the onus on everyone, not just the coming students, to be engaged and to learn it.
Thank you. We'll take an online comment or question, whatever's there. I got you now. You're coming.
We have a question from Robert Rattle. The agenda today has revolved around wealth, job creation, innovation, a lot of issues touching the digital economy theme. Yet the world today is facing a number of challenges that are actually derived from these issues. Instead of digital economy, should we not be discussing digital empowerment?
Would you like to make a comment? Or would you like to make a comment? Okay, we got it noted.
Yeah.
Microphone way up here, please.
Thank you. My name is Roland Collins, and I develop e-learning solutions for people with Down syndrome. Now, I noticed on a lot of your presentations the sort of exclusion of issues regarding people with disabilities, not only in terms of digital literacy, but in terms of access to the internet. And it's kind of glaring by its omission, so I'm wondering if there's any comment on that.
And my apologies, because when I talked about the need to find out more and include and bring to the table marginalized and disadvantaged groups, it was meant broadly. It was those individuals who, for various reasons, currently have barriers in access and gaining literacy skills. So I totally agree with you that that's our challenge, is how can we bring all of these different segments of the population who don't usually have a voice and who tend to be marginalized in these discussions. I think that's a huge piece of this puzzle.
In your experience, sir, was there something in particular that you would like to see happen?
Well, I think, if you look at, it's a broad, when you start talking about people with disabilities, it's really, it can be just from access of people who are visually impaired having access to the internet, which is a huge issue. And again, no comment on that. And other people, let's say, I work with people with Down syndrome and develop solutions for them. There's a whole other area of digital literacy for that population and that group. There's a whole lot of promise because for a variety of reasons, people with physical disabilities could benefit from greater social networks and using the internet for that purpose. But this is, I think that, there's a whole wealth of need there. It would have been nice, and I understand what you're saying, but it's sort of glaring by its omission that and perhaps a suggestion moving forward that somehow a greater efforts made to include people with disabilities in further discussions and surveys and focus groups and so on, because I think that's a population that can benefit hugely from the internet and the social media aspects of the internet.
Great, we've got noted. Thank you, sir. There's some comments right here. Gentleman with his hand up, white shirt. Yep.
Hi, my name's Joe Thornley, and I have a .ca blog domain, and my company's on .ca, and I say that because I want to talk about the framing of the culture in the digital, in the literacy. The words were protect and promote and preserve. And I think that the choice of language frames issues in a way, and that's a very rearward framing of those issues. I think, and I'm a Trudeau liberal, so I think those words and that framing reflects on a time when we lacked confidence, when we did aim to the middle, and when we were dealing with scarcity. I think that I would like to see come out of this a reframing of the cultural issues towards the concept of presence, that we are there, that we can find ourselves, and that we be supporting the verbs create and publish, so that we provide support to the 1 in 10 people who actually create the manifestations of Canadian culture.
Thank you. We're getting a recurring theme on supporting creativity, which is really interesting. We have one comment here. I'm coming to the right and then over to the left. Yep.
Okay. My name is Susan Murphy, and I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm also a part-time professor at Algonquin College. And this talk about digital literacy, I think that there's a certain part of this that has to begin with the teachers. First of all, I'm a little bit surprised about how much consultation has gone on with the post-secondary level. You mentioned a survey. I don't feel like there's enough going on at the post-secondary level to talk to students and teachers. And as a teacher, I'm coming across, with my peers and my colleagues, that there's a real lack of confidence and understanding and knowledge around technology in general, how it works in the classroom. You know, the tool, like the teachers just don't have the tools right now, and I think that there has to be, you know, some ways that we can develop training for the teachers so that their confidence levels start to be raised, and so that they can actually help students to learn this stuff. But we need to learn it first, and we need to be confident and comfortable with it. So.
Thank you. Oh, we comment from Heather.
Maybe if I could just comment briefly on that. It strikes me that there is a bit of a digital divide going on at universities, where in most situations, you listen to our speaker this morning from Canary, Jim Roche. You know, there is incredible technical capacity at the post-secondary institution level across this country, and yet it's not in classrooms. You have supercomputers that have been funded through the Canada Foundation for Innovation that are underutilized. They're bought for one project, they run for a year, and then they sit there, and nothing's happening in the classrooms. And so I think that there really are some challenges there. The University of Winnipeg has struck a deal with Cisco over its video conferencing new technology, and yet it's not at the classroom. So I think that's something that warrants a lot more dialogue, I think. So yeah, we've captured that.
Thank you. Something here? Yep.
Hi there, I'm Leah Worthman, former Algonquin College professor, now with Service Canada, and I'm also board member for the Canadian Public Relations Society. And I want to pick up on a couple of the themes that have been spoken about here, and really this notion of Len talking about the next 365 days being really critical. We have parents who are supposed to be teaching their children how to access, but they don't have the skills themselves. We have teachers who are standing in that gap, but they still need to be better trained and empowered to help make, you know, the next generation stand up and sort of take us forward. But I think that what we're really talking about is some paradigms shifting. And there's one that I find particularly intriguing, and that's around the notion of personal information. What constitutes personal information? What I'm entitled to keep private? And what I, as a citizen of a country or a community or a global economy, should be sharing with private sector organizations who can take and leverage that data, develop apps, that sort of thing. And the reason I bring this up is because the other aspect to me of social is collaboration. And I'm sitting in a government organization right now, Human Resources Social Development Canada, Service Canada. We have a repository of incredibly powerful information that we don't really share very well. And I look at people like the City of Ottawa who were clever enough to say, here's my data, go you guys and see what you can do with it. So now you can check on available rink times in your neighborhood and all that sort of thing. Didn't cost taxpayers a penny. And you've got all these great technological solutions being developed at no cost, really no risk. But what is involved in order to make that possible is this shift in thinking around ownership and protection of information. So I guess part of my challenge to the room here is, as these people who are kind of standing in the gap between, you know, the 20th century and the 21st century and what's going to be coming in the next year, 2 years, 10 years, is we have to start to shift the thinking around what this what this personal information is worth to communities as well as to individuals.
Do you have any ideas on what the catalyst for that shift might be?
I think it has to be, it's almost one of these tipping point things. We have to see a groundswell of solutions coming out of, like City of Ottawa, Vancouver did some stuff. We have to just, you know, federal government, we're all about waiting and seeing, watching what other people are doing, because we're not in the business of taking risk. It's not a responsible way to govern. We have to, you know, watch kind of what's happening and you know, build on best practices and talk to people like you and come out to sessions like this and really learn about what is a thoughtful, considerate way to move forward. But at some point, you have to start to take some risks. And I think, you know, in my case, the way I build my arguments is I point to other people's successes. And that's the only, to my mind, at this point anyway, the only compelling argument we have, is we point to others and show where it's worked. And you build business cases around that. But, you know, this again comes back to the notion of community and the social space allowing us to do that. We have access to those case studies now. And so I think we need to do a better job maybe in Canadian federal government, because I want to see us back in rank number 1, 2, or 3. Number 1 would be my preference. I think we need to really encourage each other to seek out those great examples, share them, champion them, as Glenn would say, become an evangelist for this kind of thing. I guess it wasn't Glenn, I'm sorry, it was the CIRA president. Apologize. But that's why we're here in this room, is because I think we want to join the movement.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that you guys can do to help us by way of sharing these great success stories through the media, through our organizations, that will help those of us who have to really do our homework and demonstrate, dot all our I's and cross all our T's before we can make these cases work. You need to feed us that stuff.
Great, thank you. New ideas, over here on the left.
Oh, check, test sibilance. My name is Steve Nackby, and I'm a proud Canadian and owner of a .ca domain. A couple of things I just wanted to comment on to be mindful of is from this morning's talk, we heard about the stovepipes were all converging. And as our stovepipes converge, and we put all our packets in one basket, so to speak, to watch out for obviously the digital haves and have-nots, because access seems to be a recurring theme from all of the presentations, but also the rise of the new monopolies, like the infrastructure monopolies, where it used to be phone and TV, now you're having infrastructure monopolies concentrated in Bell and TELUS and Rogers. Usage-based billing debate is one example of that. And also the content monopolies a little bit too, like Google. From the lunchtime speak, we talked about, we heard about the small room sophistication, but eventually Google's going to probably come along and buy the house. So given our regulatory framework was born out of a time where it's more suited for chopping things down and digging things out of the ground and selling them, how we deal with the new digital monopolies is, I think, going to be an ongoing challenge.
So are you suggesting we need regulatory changes? Is that?
I don't know. I'm not actually suggesting that. I just know that monopolies are where the money's at. And we have to be mindful of all of that information and all of that data collected, concentrated in very few hands.
Okay, thank you. Right behind you, sir.
My name is Fraser Liscombe. I'm a returning CEO and president of the Inventors Resource Cooperative. It was an organization I founded in 1995 to handle the economic downturn of 1989, which most people don't understand was the reason we ended up in the recession we just had now, because at that time we started taking the bottom out of the economic engine, and we pretty well are at the end of that road, so there's a lot of changes coming. In 95, we had a lot of talent, we had a lot of equipment sitting around, so what I built was a new corporation that allowed, it was basically what we now know as an innovation hub. 50 members supported over 50 grassroots R&D projects over the last 15 years by using a sustainability software that allowed everything to become an investment or potential investment. The one thing I've found over the years, we use students, unemployed, all the things that our community basically throws away to create something of value. And we've done over $1 million in R&D in a town that doesn't support R&D, let alone even understands what grassroots R&D is. So the end result is, the one thing I've noticed, after I resigned as chairman president, I went as a janitor back at Carleton University. Worked 5.5 hours. 3 months later, I ended up to be the troubleshooter of the company because of all my various skills to get the impossible done. But the one thing I do is, when you're in that position, you get to talk to professors. You get to talk to students. You see a lot of people do a lot of different things. And because I'm a natural-born innovator, administrator, and analyst, when people do things, I can tell you where the result is going to be. And I have a really long track record of being right more than I am wrong. The one thing I found was during the last election, I ran as mayor to see if this town was ready to accept a 21st century transit system. I got the same thing in the marketplace as I got out of Carleton. I understand we need change, just as long as the change has no impact on what I do or how I do it. But the reality is what you're doing and how you're doing is now 20th century, and we're in a global economy. That's a reality. We're going to have to compete. The internet, anybody understands the internet is the key to the future. If you cannot communicate, you cannot work with other communities, with other people in the world, you're going to be left behind. That's why we're going down, because we do not support all aspects of what? It's not just the internet. It is all connected. There are things that you think are unimportant that had to be looked at. One of them is we're talking about education. My daughter this last year in high school, wanted to take more computer. The first year she was in it, she actually knew a little bit more than the average student, and sometimes knew a little bit more than the teacher. The teacher was a good teacher, interested. When she wanted to take technology this year, not enough students wanted to take the course, so they canceled the course, so she couldn't take the course. But she's like myself. Give her technology in a book, and within the amount of time it takes her to read it, she'll know how to operate it and use it to whatever function as well. And that's her natural ability and skills. So the end result is, sometimes I find that what's happening is a lot of the stuff that's being driven now is being driven by two things. One is that we don't have enough, it's being driven by budget. I watch this at Carleton every day. They try to save $2 here and it costs them $100 over here, and they don't understand the $100 over here or why it's going to get there. The other one is, we're at the point where if you cannot compete because you've got a cost of living that is being driven by greed and speculation, then the end result is, how do you compete in a global economy? Think about it. My property tax on a place that I've rented for 23 years went up 70% in 2 years because of speculation and the way the tax system is set up. Well, that reflects back to all technology companies that are coming in. Think about it. If you got to pay somebody $70,000 so he can survive in this city, and it's going to cost them $500,000 to $1 million for a home that they would like in an area that they'd love to live in, then the end result is the company has to pick up that cost and reflect that in their equipment, in their service, whatever. So the end result, how do you, if your costs keep going up at the rate that's been going up, which is 7% every year for the last 8 years, and we did not see that in our financials because it come out of your pocket. It's hidden in different ways in which what you do is you basically pay the same thing you did 70 years ago, but you're going now only get half of what you got 7 years ago, so that means you got to buy twice as much. So the end result, that reflects again on what it's going to cost to have product.
So it's really important. And so
Yeah.
I think we're getting a big message from you that's saying, you know, it really is, if we're going to leverage the internet, we have to look at the wide spectrum, a great deal of interconnectivity, a lot of impacts that we may not see at the beginning. It's really a big picture, isn't it?
Yeah, and the one thing I found, Canada is one of the most innovative countries in this world. Did you know the top 100 ideas ended up having to leave this country and they made trillions of dollars forever, financed them, hundreds of thousands of jobs. I see this every day in people that have that ability, but they cannot get the support system. And it doesn't take that much to get the support system. But if we can support 50 projects over the last 15 years, think of what you could do with just a little bit of more innovation. We're in the middle of transferring our software that we developed that allows everything to become an investment and potentially that. It also allows partnerships to operate anywhere in the world. That way we're getting out of the Ottawa limitations. We're going to go.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, just to let you know, in 2002, we offered the government this, and the end result was everybody supported that we should be in every Canadian community. And the letter I got back after they got done was it was the most innovative investment system they'd seen in a long time, but they didn't support that type of innovation. And there's one of the blockages that you're going to find. And I've dealt with just about every level of government, and that blockage does get in the way of everything you want to do unless you're very creative to get around it.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Right here, please. Sorry, the gentleman on your, right here, and then next. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ben McKelvey. I'm a graduate student at York and Ryerson University. I've been trying to be polite, so I'm just trying to figure out the best time to address this question. So allow me to frame it around the question of digital literacy. What I've been interested in studying the internet is trying to deal with the complexity of it. I think this is the question that we're all dealing with today, is you're dealing with a system that is profoundly more difficult than any of us can ever get our heads around. Yet we, I think, continue to rely upon very traditional methods of understanding such a complex medium. So I've been intrigued by certain tools, public tools to study the internet. This has been something that's been popularized by the FCC in the United States and across the world. I just recently found out in Sweden as well. So the idea is that home users can test their internet connection for things like traffic shaping, their bandwidth tests, certain sorts of line capabilities, and this type of research then is pooled to create common repositories of knowledge that help us better understand how the internet works. And this, I think, presents a solution or a potential solution to some of the problems we're facing with trying to understand the internet and trying to regulate the internet. So what I'd like to put forward is, I think these tools are actually quite vital for the future of internet governance. And for around this room, when we're thinking about how to go forward on developing a structure for Canadian internet governance, I think that these tools need to be at the forefront, at the foundation. We need to be starting to think of ways to have Canadians be able to engage in researching, understanding the internet, and then moving forward and creating policy tangibly about this. So I've been trying to set up, and I would like to see, establish certain infrastructure, public infrastructure that will allow Canadians to perform such tests. This is what I was talking about in the United States. The FCC has been relying on a measurements lab network that they've been able to allow average American citizens to test their internet connection, and that helps the FCC make certain decisions. Basically, the thing is that I'm a lowly PhD student here, and so I'm actually trying to put forward this idea to see whether it would take seed, whether it would take hold in some of you in this room, that it could go forward and that we could actually start creating or trying to build this infrastructure, which, from my own experience, has been a little difficult. So I just wanted to plant this idea. If anybody wants to talk to me, I'm happy to go forward. And then further, I'd just like to discuss what are some of the ways, when we're talking about digital literacy, what are some of the ways that instead of thinking about how we can apply older policy models onto the internet, what are some of the opportunities that the internet provides to average citizens to be able to participate in the policy process? How can we think of an internet governance strategy that is designed first and foremost for the internet? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for those very specific comments. If you'd pass the microphone just to the gentleman on your right here, and then I'm going to go online. It's coming. One more time.
Hi, my name is Dan Brazo from Croc Local. Again, I think that maybe we understand certain issues, but maybe our scaling of the ideas is somewhat, everybody knows that the internet is a worldwide economic revolution, no question there. But I think maybe we tend to forget that it is a car, it is a vehicle, and objects seem closer than they appear. You got to think that you've got an idea like literacy, digital literacy. Yes, it is perhaps a national or a bigger problem, but if you try to work it at the local level, in every city, and everybody does their job, you'll get to attain the goal, which is to, fix the problem to a bigger scale. Same thing, we're talking economy. I mean, retail business is 10% of the Canadian workforce. It's $400 billion a year that we spend in store, but we also spend $15.1 billion on the internet. 95 million orders last year, 49 million for products from abroad. That's $8 billion of our money that we're, you know what I mean? And the local guys, they're fighting one another, forgetting that the bigger battle is being lost while we spend our money elsewhere. I think if we bring local search engines or ideas to the local level and work with our community, we'll get the thing going. We need to stop thinking, yes, I agree, think big, but sometimes you got to take a little small step to take a bigger one and go from there.
Great, thank you, very clear. Online. Yep,
So
after.
we have a pretty technical question from Gert Graham online, and it's something that we really haven't talked about today, and I'm not sure if it's for the current panel to discuss or if Byron Holland would like to maybe address this one. It's about security, and as I said, it is technical, so in layman's terms, if I may, what are we doing to protect our IT infrastructure from attacks?
Do we have anybody in the room who would like to volunteer a response? We may have to advise that person that we'll take the question under advisement. I don't think we have that technical expert. Sorry? Heather? Okay, sorry.
Yes, some of those security issues did come up at the city consultations as well. Although we were a little surprised. We thought that it would come up more often than it did. We thought that it would come up more frequently than it actually did. Certainly in an international setting, this comes up at the Internet Governance Forum a fair bit, and it also comes up in international development situations where it's not just a question of hacking online and attacks on denial of service attacks, all of those sorts of things, but it's the actual deconstruction of the physical infrastructure that takes place in times of conflict. So tearing down cell phone towers, that sort of thing. These are big issues, and they're certainly ones that require further exploration, and we'll certainly put that into the next round of the white paper that CIRA, ISD, and MNET are working on.
Okay, thank you. There's a gentleman right here with a question, and just before you speak, sir, we're looking at a lot of the topics that we were going after, but I'm just looking again at some of the detailed questions we have, and one of the things we wanted to know a bit more about is what are the specific roles that specific stakeholders might need to play around digital literacy, in particular, roles for specific stakeholders. So if you've got ideas on that, I'll be coming back to you. If you go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Chris Doyle, and I'm a Canadian. I have a couple of .ca domain names and work in the internet and web-based services arena. Today, what I've been hearing and something that came to mind was currently I'm working with an employer who's deploying a learning management system, and they're going to be able to deliver content to about 16,000 people in Ottawa. And one thing that I would like to know if MNET or anyone else has access to is there any royalty-free standardized content that would support digital life skills training? It would be something that I could do in the next few months that would affect 16,000 people and then allow them to go forth and train their family, their friends.
I'd be happy to talk with you. That I think it's a little more involved an answer than for this forum, but I'd be very happy to talk with you after.
We're going to have a break in a few minutes, maybe we can get
Okay.
together. Another point, we'll come right here. Microphone's coming.
So number one, to echo a lot of what was said, thank you very much for convening the consultation. So I had a couple of issues. It's really a comment and maybe some questions. So we've talked all about the issues, the problems, the challenges. You've had consultations. I guess one of my concerns is what's after the consultation. So I'm going to, and that speaks to what you talked about. What's the role, let's say, of CIRA? I would hope it's to help get an action plan in place and a measurable, tangible action plan with a time frame. Let's see, we've talked about Canada being 14th out of 23 in the OECD countries. So where's the action plan in place to move us up to 1 or 2? I love it. I think it's great we consult, but I'd like to see us move to action again with tangible a plan, and that we come back and measure the plan. Don't just put the plan in place. Let's measure it, see how we compare. Are we making progress? If not, why? I think that's a great role for CIRA, just to keep that moving. Because I think, again, we've talked about the jurisdictions. There's big issues. Certainly with digital literacy, giant issues. Is it federal? Is it provincial? Is it municipal? Who is going to pay? And other people have talked about that. We're talking about all these solutions, and I think, yes, local is important. I agree with what a lot of people have said, but there needs to be leadership, and I think to keep things moving, so I think that's an important role.
Okay.
I don't know what you have.
Thank you.
Got anybody got something to say about that, about the time frame, about the action plan?
Actually, and Byron was quite eloquent this morning in talking about the hopes of this. You know, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of a dialogue. This has never been done. We're very excited about it. We're very excited to be working with CIRA on it. I think in the next session, you'll probably hear a little bit more about next steps and where we're going. But yes, we're hoping that this will have legs, that this will inform something significant and measurable and achievable.
And Byron.
Oh, and Byron
More
has a
from
mic.
Byron right now.
Sure. As I said this morning, I think CIRA has a role to play here. Sorry to make you all turn right around, but I think CIRA has a real role to play in our ability to convene a forum like this, to bring an educated viewpoint, both from the global community back home, as well as from here at home, out to the global community. This is a first event for us. We're really happy to see the turnout and the feedback and the passion and the insight. I think it speaks well to doing this again, although part of what we'll be looking at when we review what's happened here today is, what is the feedback? Is there a need? Are we the people to do it? Us, our partners on the stage? You know, how are we going to go forward? So can we give you a clear answer today? No, but the feedback will help inform what that answer is. And we certainly believe it's turned out well thus far.
No, and thank you. And it's a start, it's a process. I just hope that we're going to get some action out of all this, because we have been talking for years about catching up. So I hope that that will come to fruition.
Thank you. We've got time for one or two more comments. Did you have something? Yes, I do. Okay, right here. So we'll take one more after this, and then we'll take a break.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Is it okay? Yes, my name is John Barini, and my company is Best of Canada. Hopefully will elevate you on OECD level. I have a specific question on digital literacy. It seems to me that you cannot separate financial and economic literacy from digital literacy. One of the reasons we had a financial crisis is because people simply do not understand the economic underpinnings of society. And I was wondering, in your stakeholder discussions and in your community and economic development discussions, did you speak to insurance companies, insurance associations, banking groups, and so on? Because the society really pivots around that. And it's like having an airplane flying a 777 with a pilot without a co-pilot.
Yeah, actually, maybe if I could speak to that. Certainly in Winnipeg that came up, and we did invite people from Great West Life and so on to come. But what was really interesting was the woman who came from one of the First Nations investment corporations, where they have a specific mandate on doing venture capital investment and financial management with the various First Nations communities in Manitoba. And this issue of financial literacy for them was absolutely key. You know, how can you compete if you don't have even the basics of a banking system, starting with microcredit, building on top of that, and learning how then to actually build out an economy. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, I agree with your point.
So one more comment for this round, and I'll remind you, we're not finished consulting. We've got another round. We're going to give you some more information after the break. We're going to come back and talk to you again. So just to wind it up for today, oh, that's two. Come on.
I'm going to keep it quick this time.
All right.
But it's actually in response to an earlier comment just about the concerns of the internet funneling, like big companies funneling money overseas or funneling money out of the Canadian economy. There are ventures and opportunities on the internet which help facilitate local businesses. And one thing I've seen around Ottawa recently is justeat.ca. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but basically it is tied to internet literacy, because a lot of these small eateries and restaurants who do food delivery don't have the in-house expertise to set up their own website, and even then it's very difficult for them to attract the traffic to their own website. This is a company that actually allows local eating establishments to join them, and then for a fee off of the food delivery service, they're listed on their site. You just put in your postal code, and the food comes to your door. So this is a way that small companies can compete, and just by the internet can provide services that can help them facilitate that. Also things like Kijiji and services like and eBay allow small businesses or individuals to provide services or offer products.
Okay.
And with other people still making a profit on the internet.
A great example, really, because you've got local focus, you've got collaboration happening that's technology enabled between local businesses, which are driving an economy and increasing the capacity for digital literacy. That's really, a simple, straightforward approach, but one that's very comprehensive in what it's delivering. Pretty good.
So maybe we can try and find ways to facilitate those kinds of business opportunities and foster them within the community.
Good. Thanks very much.